We are back, and we're in the East Room of the White House. This is where the president nominated federal judge Sonia Sotomayor to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that became a big story during our day here at the White House. Specifically, a controversial quote from the judge dating back to a lecture she gave in 2001. The critics pounced on it, and as we watched, the White House decided to use its biggest weapon to hit back, the president himself.
I would hope that a wise Latina woman
with the richness of her experience would more often than not
reach a better conclusion than a white male who hasn't lived that life.
Press office. Press office.
White House press office.
It's the kind of scenario a press office dreads. A presidential nominee makes a remark that gives the opposition ammunition.
How you doing? Good, how about you?
And yet, when the day begins, Press Secretary Robert Gibbs and his deputy Josh Earnest seem to think the Sotomayor nomination is not an immediate concern.
There's not necessarily a lot of new Supreme Court stuff.
I don't think there's going to be a lot of Supreme Court in the news today.
But as the morning political talk shows crank up, it becomes clear the Sotomayor issue isn't going away.
Newt Gingrich says she's racist.
New racism is no better than old racism.
I believe it's 100% racist.
Supreme Court, man. Supreme Court.
Within the hour, senior advisor David Axelrod and his staff react.
We have to put a meeting together this morning on the Supreme Court.
Axelrod's small office doesn't reflect his stature in this administration. A better hint is the location. It's right next to the Oval Office. Now, how candid do things get between the two of you?
You know, I've had a few conversations since I've been here that he didn't necessarily want to have. But he invites candor. He invites honesty.
The candid advice seems to be do something about Judge Sotomayor. And so at 11:10 a.m., the White House communications staff starts prepping a response.
We're going to have a series of quotes for you to read.
Yeah, off the stuff we did yesterday.
Yeah, the O'Connor-Alito stuff.
By 12 noon,
hey, it's Jim Messina from the White House.
the deputy chief of staff is calling Capitol Hill to lock in Democratic support.
Opposing this nomination is a very, very bad thing.
She does believe in race-based justice.
All right.
At 2:20, Press Secretary Robert Gibbs thinks he's ready to meet the press.
Have a good briefing.
Thank you. Gibbs hopes to blunt the criticism by quoting a conservative Supreme Court justice.
Justice Alito, during his confirmation hearing, referenced his heritage. He said, and that quote, "When a case comes before me involving someone who's an immigrant, I can't help but think of my own ancestors who came to this country."
But the tactic backfires.
More recently, I understand. I hope that doesn't preclude me from being able to quote him. Some days are good, and some days aren't so good.
At 2:45, with Gibbs still at the podium in the briefing room, Axelrod heads down the White House driveway to test drive some talking points live on MSNBC.
You're talking about someone here who has more experience on the federal bench than anybody in 100 years.
An hour later, President Obama's in the diplomatic room to deliver his weekly address. What used to be the radio address is now done on video as well and posted by the White House on YouTube.
Tell me when you guys are ready. I feel good today. I think it was going to be one takes the whole way through.
He's devoting the address to a defense of his nominee.
This week, I nominated Judge Sonia Sotomayor of the U.S. Court of Appeals to replace Justice... so much for one take.
It ends up being more like 4 takes.
This week, I nominated Judge Sonia Sotomayor of the U.S. Court of Appeals to replace Justice David Souter. After reviewing many terrific candidates, I am certain that she's the right choice.
But the video he just shot won't be posted till the next day, and the Sotomayor controversy is simmering right now.
Comments made by Rush Limbaugh and Newt Gingrich are getting a whole lot of attention.
At 5 p.m., Deputy Chief of Staff Messina meets with White House aides Cecilia Munoz and Christina Chen. On the agenda, assuring Latino support for the Latina nominee.
We have to be in regular touch with these folks because it really is maddening watching this sort of hate fest going on.
Finally, the White House decides to use the big gun. They know we're scheduled for an interview with the president, and he is ready with his comment on the nominee's comment. It's your judgment that's one of those she'd rather have back if she had it to redo?
I'm sure she would have restated it, but if you look in the entire sweep of the essay that she wrote, she was simply saying that her life experiences will give her information about the struggles and hardships that people are going through that will make her a good judge.
He continues defending his nominee for 10 minutes. Then the interview moves on to other topics. Finally, when aides signal the time is up, we begin to wrap it up. I can't thank you enough for the generosity of your time.
I appreciate that. And you know, actually, before we cut off, I just want to go back to that earlier point about the justice, because
just in case we haven't gotten the message, he spends nearly 4 more minutes talking about the nominee.
This is somebody who's going to apply the law and be fair to everybody.
It's his first public comment on the Sotomayor controversy. We report it out immediately and see firsthand the difference between a talking point delivered by a White House staffer and the same one delivered by the president.
Late this afternoon, President Obama addressed a controversial choice of words.
By 5:01, the president is watching himself on MSNBC. By 6:12, Fox News. Associated Press at 6:19, then Twitter, then YouTube. And what seems like an eternity later, the next morning, the front page of the Washington Post. It's the breakneck news cycle of 2009, and in order to keep up, the president surrounds himself with highly skilled and fiercely loyal players, one of them more fierce than the rest.
I hate all of you.
Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel, now in his second tour of duty at the White House.
I got one place I'm hiding for you.